Okay, welcome back to our, we're talking about weather now, so this is our weather show for today. Today it's on air masses. Air masses, you guys, are large bodies of air with uniform, which we mean uniform is the same, temperature and moisture content, meaning throughout that particular mass of air that comes into the area, it's going to have the same temperature and it's going to have the same moisture content. So if it's really dry and warm, for example, that's just one of an example that I can give you. Okay, now this is all going to be determined by the region or the source region that it forms. That's the geographic region or the area that the air mass comes from or forms in. Okay, that's what we mean by the source region. These different air masses might sit over top of an area, take on the characteristics that that area has, and then that weather works its way towards us. And that's what we mean by the source region where it forms. Okay, now the characteristics or the weather characteristics depend on where it formed, and that's what I just was trying to talk about, is that source region. Now, air mass characteristics. Air mass characteristics, the moisture content. That was one of the things that I just showed you on that last slide. The moisture content, it can either be lowercase. These are all lowercase for the moisture content. You got maritime, which is wet, okay, and it forms over water, or marine, okay, marine area. That's what we mean by maritime. Now, continental forms over a continent, okay. One of the 7 continents, continental. It's going to be dry, okay. If it forms over water, it's going to be wet. If it forms over land, it's going to be dry, okay. So it forms over land or a continent. Okay, so that's pretty straightforward. But like I just said, make sure you write these with a lowercase letter because, and you'll see in your reference tables, it'll show you that. We'll talk about that in a second here. Okay, now the other characteristic is the temperature. Now, I know you guys probably can't see this too well, but I try to do the blue to try and show you. A T means tropical. Okay, tropical air mass, so this is the temperature characteristics. I just talked to you about the moisture characteristics. These are the temperature. T for tropical. This only means warm. Do not get it confused with wet. It has nothing to do with wet. Okay, yes, if it was a maritime air mass, that would tell you if it's wet. If it was a continental air mass, it would be dry. But the T only means tropical as in warm. Okay, forms near the equator. Okay, we aren't going to typically get air masses from the southern hemisphere. So it forms near the equator. Low latitudes like the Tropic of Cancer is 23.5 degrees north. So if it forms in that region between the equator and the Tropic of Cancer or around that area, that would be a tropical air mass because it came from the south of where we live, so it's going to be warm. Polar, that's definitely to the north of us. Okay, it's a cold air mass. Forms near the poles or high latitudes. Now, the very cold one is the Arctic air mass, and that only typically happens in the winter months because for us in the northern hemisphere, it only happens in the winter months because, for example, we're losing daylight hours. Okay, you go far enough above the Arctic Circle, okay, and they aren't getting any daylight this time of the year, and that keeps creeping its way down and down south towards the Arctic Circle. On the first day of winter is when everybody above the Arctic Circle does not get any daylight on that day. Okay? And then it starts working its way back the other way. But that creates very cold regions. Okay? Forms in the Arctic region, Arctic Circle in the winter. Okay? I did not say it, but I meant to. Those are drawn the temperature for the air masses. The temperature is always with an uppercase letter, and if you see all these right here, the second letter is an uppercase letter. The first letter is a lowercase letter for the moisture content. Okay? So, these are the types of air masses. These are found on page 13 of your reference table. Okay? Now, the air mass symbols. Continental, A for Arctic. Continental Arctic. Okay? That, continental, I just told you continental means that it's going to be dry. Look down here. The maritime means that it's going to be wet. Okay? So, Arctic, I just told you was very cold. Polar is just plain old cold. And tropical is warm. So then you got polar, which is cold, and tropical, which is warm. Now, right here's all the air mass names just written out. And then you have the characteristics over here. Okay? So, the one thing I do want to explain though really quick. Continental, Arctic. Now, I don't know if you guys remember from what we've said in class, but only when the air starts getting really cold. You only have, for example, like humid days. Okay? Humid days with a lot of these maritime, you're going to feel the humidity more in a maritime tropical because it's very warm weather. In the summer, we feel these humid days. Like I was just starting to say, when the air gets really cold, okay, the air starts feeling very dry. The air can't hold as much moisture, so that's why you get a continental Arctic. When they form in the Arctic region, these are regions that are so far north of us that even the water there is ice, so you're not getting much evaporation that takes place at all. But the other thing is the air is so cold, it just doesn't have the ability at that temperature to hold much moisture. Okay, so you won't ever get a maritime Arctic air mass because the air is so cold. I mean, we're talking typically in the heart of our winter, in February, late January into February, when these Arctic air masses typically start coming through, they're going to be negative 20, negative 40 degree temperatures. This time of the year, it may not be that cold, but it is a dramatic temperature change to what our normal temperatures are. So just quite a bit colder. Okay, now I haven't heard about any Arctic air masses working their way through, but I'm sure in the future there will be one that'll work through definitely this winter. Okay, but just understand, continental Arctic, dry, very cold. Continental polar is dry and cold. Continental tropical, still dry because it's continental. Tropical means that it's warm. The maritime is wet, polar is cold, and then the maritime is wet, and tropical is warm. So these are the combinations that you can have. Like I said, take a look at page 13 of your reference tables. All these are listed there, except for it's not going to look like this. It gives you the air mass symbol, and it gives you the air mass name. Okay? But last thing that I want to definitely say, tropical air masses form to the south of us. Okay? But still between the equator and the tropics. Okay? If you guys have more questions on this, we're going to talk about it a little bit more. We'll show you a map in class that will actually show the where these air masses form on a map. And so hopefully if this doesn't totally clarify it for you, make sure you ask questions if what we show you in class doesn't. Okay.